The sound of rain pattering against the large glass windows filled the mansion's living room. Vine sat by the window with a mug of hot chocolate, her gaze unfocused as she listened to the smooth rhythm of the rain. Across the room, Jungkook leaned against the doorway, observing her with a sly smile. Jungkook, you look like the protagonist of one of those sad romance novels you're always reading. Vine, and you look like the annoying side character who thinks he's funny. He raised an eyebrow, stepping closer. Annoying? I'd like to think myself as the dashing love interest. Vine sipped her drink, trying not to smile. You keep thinking that, Jungkook. He plopped onto the couch beside her, his presence instantly disturbing the peaceful ambience. So, what's the deep thought today? Dreaming of running away? Again? She shot him a glance, her tone dry. Actually, I was imagining life without your constant commentary. Impossible, he said with a grin. Life without me would be boring, admit it. Vine set her mug down, turning to face him fully. You are very confident for someone who just interrupted my quiet time. Confident? He leaned closer. Or accurate? She leaned back slightly, raising her hands in mock surrender. Fine, you win. Now, can I have my piece back? Jungkook shook his head, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Nope, I'm bored and you're the only entertainment around. Vine groaned, standing up to move to another spot, but Jungkook grabbed her wrist gently and pulled her back down. Not so fast, he said, his voice playful. Jungkook, she warned, but her tone held more exasperation than actual anger. I have an idea, he said, ignoring her glare. Let's dance. Vine blinked at him. Dance? In the middle of the living room. To what? The sound of rain? Exactly, Jungkook said, standing up and holding his hand out to her. Come on, it will be fun. She crossed her arms, refusing to take his hand. I'm not dancing with you. Why? Scared you will fall for me even more? He teased, wiggling his fingers. Vine rolled her eyes. I'm scared you will step on my feet. Trust me, he said, grabbing her hand despite her protests and pulling her to her feet. Reluctantly, she allowed him to place one hand on her waist while the other held her hand. They swayed awkwardly at first, Vine glaring up at him the whole time. This is ridiculous, she muttered. You're smiling, Jungkook pointed out, his own grin widening. I'm not, she shot back, but the corner of her lips betrayed her. He twirled her suddenly, catching her by surprise and pulling her back against his chest. You're terrible at pretending, you know. She looked up at him, her heart racing despite herself. And you're terrible at leaving me alone. Jungkook smirked, leaning closer. Because I know you secretly love it. Vine didn't answer, choosing, instead, to step on his foot lightly and laugh when he winced. You're dangerous, he said, pulling her even closer. And you're insufferable, she replied, though her voice was softer this time. They continued swaying in the rain-lit gloom, the world outside forgotten, as Vine finally allowed herself to relax in his arms, just a little. Jungkook chuckled softly, looking down at her with a gleam in his eyes. Dangerous and insufferable. Sounds like the perfect love story to me. Vine tried to suppress the small smile threatening to form. It's more like a tragic comedy, she quipped, resting her hand on his shoulder as they moved in slow, uncoordinated steps. He grinned. Tragic for who? Me? Because you keep stepping on my feet? Wine feigned innocence. Oh, sorry. Was that your foot again? Guess I'm just clumsy. Sure you are, he replied, smirking. But don't worry, Mrs. Jones. I'm a man of resilience. She arched a brow. A man of resilience, who's wincing every time I step down? He leaned closer, their faces inches apart now. You forget resilience comes with patience, and I have plenty when it comes to you. Her breath hitched slightly, but she quickly recovered, trying to break the tension with humor. I'll believe that when you last an entire day without trying to annoy me. Challenge accepted, Jungkook said immediately, twirling her grin. This time he didn't let go, spinning her until she was laughing despite herself, her hair falling in low strands around her face. She stopped suddenly, bracing her hands on his chest to steady herself. Okay, okay, enough. I'm dizzy. He steadied her, his hands firm on her waist. You know, you're terrible at sticking to your threats. You always say you hate me, but then you go and laugh like that. Don't flatter yourself, Wine said, though her voice was softer now. Jungkook tilted his head. You keep saying that, but actions speak louder than words, don't they? Actions, she challenged. Like kidnapping me for a dance I didn't agree to? Exactly, he said without missing a beat. And you didn't run away, which means you're starting to like it here. With me? Wine narrowed her eyes, but there was no real bite in her gaze. You're so full of yourself, Jungkook. And yet here you are. He teased, his grin wide and disarming. For a moment they stood still, their playful banter replaced by a comfortable silence as the rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows. Jungkook's gaze softened as he looked at her, his thumb unconsciously brushing against her side. Wine, he said, his tone quieter now. Hmm, she replied, her voice equally soft. You know, I would do anything to make you happy, right? The shift in his tone caught her off guard. She hesitated before answering, her defenses faltering. Jungkook, I never asked you to. You didn't have to, he said, his voice steady. It's just the way I feel. I know we didn't choose this life together, but I'm not going anywhere, and one day I hope you won't want me to. Wine felt her chest tighten at his words. She wanted to say something, anything, but the sincerity in his eyes left her momentarily speechless. You always know how to ruin a perfectly good argument, she said finally, her voice tinged with nervous humor. Jungkook's lips curled into a soft smile. That's because I'm winning. Winning what? She challenged, stepping back slightly to create space between them. Your heart? He said simply, his confidence unshaken. Wine scoffed, turning her back to him to hide the warmth spreading across her cheeks. Keep dreaming, Mr. Jones. He chuckled, following her retreat and gently spinning her back to face him. Oh, I don't need to dream. I'm patient, remember? And I'm very good at waiting for what I want. She stared at him, unsure whether to roll her eyes or melt under the weight of his words. Instead, she stepped on his foot again, this time on purpose. Oops, she said with a smirk, turning away again. Jungkook winced but laughed, grabbing her hand before she could escape completely. You're going to pay for that wine. I am terrified, she replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You should be, he said, pulling her back into his arms, this time in a tight embrace that left no room for protest. She looked up at him, her heart racing despite her best efforts to stay composed. You're ridiculous. His gaze locked with hers. For a brief moment, the world outside faded, the rain muffling everything but the sound of their breaths. Wine didn't pull away, and for once, she didn't have a witty comeback. Instead, she let herself rest against him, if only for a little while.